Okay. This is an important one because there's a lot of misunderstanding about this that I see going on, right? When I talk to my students in my Change Your Brain, Change Your Body program, when I talk to people in my Facebook group, Conquer the Food Fight, this is a theme that I see coming up again and again and again. And what that is this habit or this tendency we have to blame the food, right? We think it's all about the food. I hear a lot of things like, I'm a sugar addict, or I have a sweet tooth, or I just can't say no to bread, or I'm addicted to carbs, or, I'm powerless against donuts, right? Or whatever it is. And it's this constant focus on the food. And so we keep looking for solutions that have to do with the food, right? We keep looking for a different diet, a different meal plan. We're buying, every different healthy snack that we find at the grocery store. We're constantly looking on Pinterest for recipes for healthy treats, healthy desserts. We think if we could just find the right food or the right maybe combination of food, right? This sort of obsession with protein, and maybe I need more protein, and that there's a food solution to what we imagine is a food problem. And here's what I want to say about that. I think it's really important that we have this discussion, because what I know for sure, after struggling with this myself and now helping so many hundreds of people through my programs, is that it's really not about the food. Now, I will give a caveat to that and say that, of course, what you eat is important. And, I am a nutritionist, so of course I'm passionate about you eating a healthy, nutrient-dense, whole foods diet, right? I think that's absolutely vitally important. And of course, you can have cravings and reactions if you are not eating a good, balanced diet, right? But so many of the unhealthy patterns we get stuck in really have very little to do with the food. We focus on the food because that's what we see showing up, right? We see ourselves sitting on the couch at night, binging on potato chips and ice cream, but it's really not about the food. The food, that reaction, that behavior, that ice cream, potato chip, bread, whatever behavior around food is really just a symptom of some things that are going on deeper under the surface. And it's just showing up as you making unhealthy food choices. Other people have these things going under the surface, and they have different symptoms. They might be not interested in food, but they might be drinking too much. They might be taking drugs. They might be shopping too much. They might be spending too much time on social media. They might be constantly getting into unhealthy relationships. They might be gambling. Like, there's a lot of different ways that these symptoms of deeper stuff show up. For myself and for the people in my community and who take my program, it is food is how this stuff under the surface shows up, right? Food is our symptom. Food is our go-to when we are struggling with this stuff. But if we keep focusing on the food, we're never going to get to the root cause, right? Food is just the symptom. So today I kind of want to go over what I consider, what I see in my students and in my community, the four major, let's call them pillars going on under the surface that can be manifesting in a symptom of poor food choices, chronic poor food choices, right? Every night. So let's dive in. Okay, let's talk about them. I have four that I want to share with you. There's lots more. I'm sure we could go into lots of others, but I don't, want to keep this video short. So let's stick with four. And these are four things that then you can start thinking about and start noticing more and figuring out maybe which one of these four do you tend to fall into most often. Okay, the first is emotional eating, right? Eating our feelings. So you are sad, or you're stressed, or you have some anxiety, you're worried, or maybe you're bored, right? That's a big one. Or maybe you're angry or hurt, or you feel unappreciated, or maybe you feel like your life isn't where it should be. for whatever reason, and sometimes these are conscious and sometimes they're unconscious, we're using food as a way to manage these uncomfortable feelings, right? We're eating our feelings. And this happens all the time, right? I think we are all guilty of this at some point, and some more than others. And the solution to emotional eating, again, the food is just the symptom. It's just the way that you are. It's just your choice for how to manage those uncomfortable feelings. Again, other people are managing their uncomfortable feelings with other things: shopping, social media, relationships, wine, right? I, and probably you, if you're watching this, excuse me, manage those uncomfortable feelings with food. So what do we do instead? Well, I don't have a quick fix. I don't have magic beans. The way you manage this one is by simply feeling the feelings. And I know that's probably the exact opposite of what you want to hear, but two things about that. One, it's the only way, right? The only way out is through. And two, you are so much stronger than you think you are, right? Feelings are just energy. They're just thoughts. They're just beliefs that are going on up here. I know they feel overwhelming. I know that there's part of your brain that's screaming at you that they are unbearable and must not be felt, and ice cream is far better. But uncomfortable feelings are just that. They're just feelings. They're just energy. And if you let them just wash over you, they will wash away, right? They're like waves. And that's the only way to process those uncomfortable feelings. Now, you can use other tools as well, like journaling. You know, you might want to get some of those feelings and thoughts out of your head. Sometimes it can be really helpful to write things down. I'm a big fan of journaling. So you can try doing things like that. Maybe talking with somebody, you know, if there's somebody that you trust. Some people are better at kind of talking things through. But we have to address the feeling. We have to identify it, give it a name. We have to allow it to be there. And that's really the only way to deal with the emotional component of the food, okay? So that's the first one, emotional eating, eating your feelings, eating because you're feeling uncomfortable, whether that's sadness, fear, worry, stress, or just boredom, and how to manage that instead, okay? I'm doing this super high level because, again, I could talk hours about every single one of these, and I could give you a plethora of tools for each one, but I just want to give you an overcap right now, an overview of, again, what I think are the four major reasons that we tend to fall into over and over again unhealthy relationships with food, unhealthy behaviors and patterns around food that have nothing to do with the food. So the first one is emotional eating. You're just eating your feelings. The second one is just habit. Okay, so your brain is a habit-making machine. Your brain loves making habits. This is how your brain wonderfully helps you get through the day much easier, because it's made habits out of so many things, like walking, or tying your shoes, or brushing your teeth, or talking, or how to open a door. Like, you have habits around all of these things. There are neural pathways in your brain that have been created to allow this thing, this behavior, this action to become a habit. And so you can do it without thinking about it anymore. Again, wonderful when we're talking about walking, or how to open a door, or how to write your name. Not so great when we have created habits, unhealthy habits, around how we eat and why we eat. So the key to, again, I could talk for hours about habits, but I won't do that today. But I just want to leave you with that, right? This one, that number 2 is habits. And the way you start to break apart an old habit is first by noticing its trigger. Every habit has a trigger. And sometimes, again, sometimes these are conscious, but often they're unconscious. But we need to start to become more present and more mindful and more aware of our habits, and specifically the triggers for those habits. So say you are one of those people, as I have been, that is always eating on the couch at night in front of the TV. We need to start to get curious, start to notice what triggers that behavior, right? You probably don't hit the couch with your chips and ice cream at, when you walk in the door from work. That's not your trigger. Something else is your trigger, whether it's the rest of your family's in bed, the kids are in bed, whether it's the dishes are done, whether it's, a certain show is on. Like, what is the trigger that begins that habit? And then figure out what the reward is. Okay, so every habit has a trigger and every habit has a reward. There's always a reason we're doing it. Now, sometimes that reward is just, sometimes it's what we just talked about, right? It's relief from an uncomfortable feeling. Sometimes it's just the familiarity of just, this is what I always do. Sometimes it's connection with other people, especially with food, right? Maybe you and your husband watch a show every week and you eat potato chips while you do it, right? And this whole habit structure that you two have gives you a feeling of closeness, right? Of connection. So we need to get clear on what the reward is. There's some payoff, even if it's just familiarity. It's just that this is what I always do at this time. That's a payoff. That's a reward. The reason it's important to determine, discern, get clear on, identify the reward is that we have to replace it with something else. Your brain is still going to want that reward. We can't just pull the rug out from under it. Okay. So we have to figure out what the reward is. Once you figure out your trigger, figure out what's the reward, what's the payoff from this habit, and then think about another way, a healthier way, a more effective way that you can deliver that same reward to yourself without the food. All right. And that brings me to number 3. Okay. So we did emotional eating, just good old habit. And number 3 is we don't have a plan, right? This is the other reason. We're talking about reasons that people fall into unhealthy habits around food, unhealthy patterns around food that have nothing to do with food. Emotional eating was number 1. Habits is number 2. Number 3 is that we don't have a plan. Okay. So what's happening is we're going through the whole day. We're making decisions. We're making choices. We're using our decision-making power, which is also your willpower muscle. Same thing, right? Your willpower muscle is just your decision-making power. You're using that. You're sort of drawing from that bank account all day long, right? When you're deciding whether you're going to like a Facebook post, when you're deciding if you're going to tell your boss what you really think, when you're deciding what you're going to make for dinner, like you're drawing on that decision-making or willpower bank account all day long. So when you get to the end of the day, you have none left. And so it is very difficult. That's why so many of us struggle in the evening. So the way you get around this, and again, the symptom is you end up on the couch binging on junk food, but it has nothing to do with the food. It's because you have emptied your willpower bank account, your decision-making bank account. So the way around that is to have a plan ahead of time. Don't wait until the evening to try and make a good decision. Create a plan ahead of time. Again, this ties into what I was just talking about, habits. Create a plan for what you're going to do when you encounter that trigger and your brain wants that reward. What are you going to do at that exact moment instead? And you have to be very specific. It can't just be don't eat the food, right? It can't just be at night, I won't eat the food. That's not a plan. What are you going to do when when your kids are in bed and your show comes on and the ice cream is screaming at you from the freezer because you're exhausted from the day and you just want a treat? What are you going to do in that moment to give yourself the feeling of a treat, of nurturing yourself? What are you going to do that is going to, instead of the ice cream, that is going to make you feel nurtured and loved in that moment, right? You have to have a plan. So that's number 3, have a plan, right? Because that we're struggling because we don't have a plan and we're relying on an empty willpower bank account at night to make good choices. And this is why we always lose. Okay. All right. So number 1 was emotional eating. Number 2 was habit. And number 3 was we don't have a plan. Number 4, the final reason that I think we end up making poor food choices again and again that has nothing to do with food is we are ending each day with a completely empty cup. Okay. We're giving and giving and giving. We're depleting and depleting and depleting. And we end up at night exhausted and with no more resources to make good choices, right? We're completely empty. And the solution to this is to get ahead of the problem. Okay. It's very hard in that moment to make a good choice, as you know. Instead, we need to get ahead of the problem. And this is all about self-care. And when I say self-care, I don't necessarily mean manicures or massages, although those are lovely. I mean the things that really fill your cup. And this is going to be different for you than it is for me or for your friends or your sister. What are the things, what are the activities, what are the things you do or participate in What are the routines? What are the rituals? What are the activities that make you feel like you're filling your cup, right? And this could be meditation, could be a yoga class, it could be painting, it could be listening to your favorite music and dancing, it could be connecting with friends, it could be reading a great book, it could be anything. It could be making yourself a cup of tea, beautiful tea, you know, if you're a real tea lover like I am. It could be cuddling with your pets. It could be hanging out with your partner. It could be a lot of things. And again, it's going to be different for you than it is for me. And also it might change, right? What you need today might be a little bit different than what you need tomorrow or what you need next week. But it's important that we, on a daily basis, really tune in and figure out, like, what could I do today? What do I need today? Or could I set aside an hour or two this week at some point? Look at your calendar and figure out when you could set some time aside and what activities you can do during that time that will really fill your cup. Because what this is going to do, it's going to prevent you from ending every day with an empty cup. You won't get to the end of the day feeling so utterly exhausted and spent and depleted to the point where ice cream feels like the only thing that matters and you just don't care anymore, right? We've all been there. So think about what you can do. Think about what strategies you can place. Like, what are those activities? Identify them first and then figure out where you can fit them in your calendar. Like, you really need to block off time for this. And it doesn't have to be a ton of time, but, you know, maybe an hour here, hour there, a couple hours on the weekend, like where you're really going to purposefully and intentionally make time for those practices that really fill your cup, that really make you feel connected to the best part of yourself, the truest part of yourself, right? That bring you into that alignment with the truest you and just make you feel like you're filling your cup up, right? And it should be whatever that is for you, okay? But you know what those things are, I think, if you think about it, and we need to make time for that, okay? So those are the 4 things. Again, I started out by explaining that I think that we focus too much on the food when food is just a symptom of some deeper stuff going on. And these are 4 of the deeper things going on that are manifesting in potato chips and ice cream on the couch at night. But the potato chips and ice cream is not really the problem, right? The problem can be a lot of things, but these are 4 of the main ones. We're eating our feelings, emotional eating, right? We're trying to use food to manage feelings. Not going to work. We have habits. We've developed habits around ways that we use food, times that we use food, certain foods that we use to get certain feelings. These have become habits, and it feels uncomfortable to do anything else. Okay, so just good old-fashioned habits. We don't have a plan, right? So there are going to be days when you're exhausted and you get to the end of the day. That is not the time when you're going to make a good choice. You're just not. There's not enough. It's not about weakness. It's not about being lazy. It's not about being disorganized. You just have emptied your willpower bank account for the day. There's nothing left. So you need a plan in that moment that you created ahead of time, not then, that you created ahead of time that you can just follow, right? Just do what you decided on the plan. Okay, so having no plan is a big problem. And finally, ending every day with an empty cup, right? Just depleting ourselves entirely and not getting ahead of the problem by filling our cup with those activities and routines and rituals and experiences that we know really fill us up. You have to fill the cup, right? I had a mentor once that used to say, only give from the saucer. And I love that because it's this idea that you should only give from the overflow of your cup. And too often we're giving everything in the cup and we're just trying to scrape out of the bottom. There's nothing left. And that is not a time when you're going to make good food choices. Okay. So think about this. The next time you're thinking about, oh, it's the ice, I just love ice cream too much, or I just can't say no to bread, or I just have a potato chip obsession, or I'm a sugar addict. There might be some element of truth to all of those things, but those aren't the reasons why you're really going to those foods, why you feel so powerless against those foods. It's this deeper stuff that's going on. The food is just a symptom. Okay. So think about these 4 and think about which one maybe you might ring most true for you, right? There might be more than one, maybe all 4, but maybe pick one that feels like it might be the biggest problem for you and start thinking about how you can use some of the ideas I shared here and how you can go deeper into addressing that so that you're not constantly ending up using food as a way to solve the problem. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.